This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Hello and welcome to the Twilight Show. Thanks for joining me today. My special guest is Claire Vaughan, a teacher of Welsh who lives and works in Argentina. She's the coordinator who mentors teachers from Wales who moved to Patagonia to work on the Welsh language project.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Twilight Show, everyone. I'm Graham Stanley, speaking to you live from Mexico City. As I mentioned in the introduction on today's show, I'll be talking to Claire Vaughan about her work as a teacher of Welsh in Argentina. Claire was born and bred in Wales until a change in her life brought her to Patagonia for a year as a Welsh teacher. 18 years on, she still works for the British Council-led Welsh language project now as the teaching coordinator, mentoring local teachers and teachers from Wales who spend a year there. She still teaches Welsh and English in various locations and at various levels, including in private institutes, 809 and online. She graduated from Aberystwyth University with a BS Hons in Welsh language and literature before completing an MSc in Educational Management at Manchester Metropolitan University. She speaks English, Welsh and Spanish and has studied French and Portuguese, as she loves learning languages as much as teaching them. I'll be talking to Claire about teaching Welsh and more after the Teachers Talk Radio news.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
In today's educational environment, students and teachers are juggling a mix of face-to-face, online and blended learning courses. Canvas by Instructure helps teachers navigate these diverse learning experiences with a user-friendly virtual learning environment that offers flexible access to courses and a consistent learning experience, all while streamlining everyday teaching processes. The world's best schools and universities are using Canvas to create dynamic courses, collaborate seamlessly, and access actionable data that drives student success.
On the 24th to the 26th of January 2024, Bet UK is back, and even better for educators. New for 2024, Table Talks empowers educators to collaborate openly and connect deeply with like-minded individuals in the education space, as well as tech user labs, the brilliant new tutorials and working groups at Bet, where technology users will learn how to get more out of their institution's tech from the top education technology experts in the world. Whatever your goal, you'll find it at Bet 2024. Educators go free. Get your tickets today at www.uk.betshow.com/visitor-registration.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
The big political news this week was the launch of the DfE in England's consultation on how best to implement minimum levels of service in schools if teaching and support staff unions go on strike. The BBC reports that education unions who were involved in talks with government over MSLs called the announcement shameful. One of the two options being put forward is to guarantee that vulnerable children, those due to take exams, Children of critical workers and all primary school pupils can go into school on strike days. A leaked DfE document suggests that this amounts to 74% of pupils. In October, Education Secretary Gillian Keegan said MSLs would be introduced with the unions on a voluntary basis at first. But the government could use legal powers brought in earlier this year under the Strikes Act. The DfE says the plans will protect education. The consultation will last 9 weeks. All 4 teaching unions involved in talks reacted angrily to the announcement. Much of the media focus in recent days has been on the inquest into the death of Ruth Perry. The Guardian featured a report focusing on comments made by colleagues of the late head teacher, which focused on her evident distress during the days of the inspection. Much has been made of comments from Ofsted inspectors that Mrs. Perry was upset, tearful, and looked like she was in pain. The inquest began after Mrs. Perry's family discovered that its bid for legal aid had been rejected, but a crowdfunding campaign saw donations totalling more than £63,000. Behaviour in schools has also been a hot topic on both sides of the England-Scotland border. The Dunfermline Press reported that Fife Council's education chiefs are trying to curb a rise in violence in schools, but they don't believe in negative consequences. Instead, children learning about bullying should be an empowering experience. In a new version of the anti-bullying policy, the aim is stated that children do not bully others because they understand the harm it causes and choose not to cause such harm. It goes on to say where children do choose to bully, we need to engage with them educationally, supportively and restoratively rather than punitively. Comments on the paper's website, however, appear to show disapproval of the policy, with one comment describing it as utter nonsense and another saying it was psychobabble. The draft policy has been issued to head teachers, guidance staff and educational psychologists for their views, before schools are asked to create a personalised policy for their setting based on the final draft. Meanwhile, over the border in England, The Guardian reports that head teachers are describing a culture of non-compliance among pupils and parents. Whereas once a parent who was called into school to discuss concerns was likely to be broadly supportive of teachers' decisions, now heads are saying parents more often side with their child and take to social media to register their feelings. Many heads also say that behaviour has changed from having to deal with lesson disruption to managing internal truancy, as pupils come to school to socialise but refuse to attend lessons to learn. Some leaders also highlighted an increase in verbal abuse and swearing. Head teachers also pointed out that whilst challenging behaviour is nothing new, non-compliance is on the increase, and the reduction in the availability of specialist support services has made matters worse. One leader summed up the current situation. Since COVID, people seem to be far less tolerant, and that includes pupils and parents. Popular quiz show University Challenge is in the news as the BBC reports that a Christmas episode has been pulled after 2 contestants complained about a lack of provision for their disabilities. According to the report, contestants were not provided with promised audio description for visual images or subtitles to help with audio processing. The BBC agreed to withdraw the episode after the complaints were received. Finally, the BBC features a report on a civil servant who quit her Whitehall job to retrain as a teacher. The former employee of the DfE began teacher training in 2022, and Ms Melbourne is just one example of over 35s joining the profession, according to charity New Teach. Research suggests that recent graduates are shunning the profession, but older people are stepping up to fill the gap. Figures also suggest that older starters stay in the profession longer than the national average and are more representative of society in terms of gender and ethnicity. Could this be a solution to a recruitment crisis? This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
Hello and welcome back, everyone. Welcome in particular to my special guest, Claire. Claire, thank you so much for joining me. What have you been up to today?
Well, thanks for the invitation, first of all. I've had a very lazy day. It's It's just past lunchtime here, so it was a nice morning of drinking coffee, catching up with the news, and just generally relaxing after a busy week.
Very nice. And are you normally work Monday to Friday? Is that right?
Well, yes, unless there is some special event going on, which very often there is. But yes, today it's getting towards the end of term here because our school year finishes in December, and so things are getting quieter, thankfully.
Of course. And the weather's getting a little bit warmer, I suppose.
Yeah, we're supposed to be in spring, but I'm afraid to say that it's very, very slow appearing. And we've had rain and high winds.
Oh.
And I was just looking out of the window now, and I've got a beautiful view of the Andes, and they're covered in fresh snow.
Oh, wow, of course. I suppose it doesn't get very hot in Patagonia, unlike in other parts further north in Argentina.
Yes, well, I think global warming has reached here, and we've been having some hot summers the last couple of years. It's been like 30, 32, 33 on a good day, and very dry. So it's interesting to see how the winters appear to be getting longer and wetter, and the summers appear to be getting shorter and drier.
Wow, yeah. Just for those people who've never been to that part of Argentina, Patagonia, could you describe a little bit about the nature of it, what the geography's like, etc., to put people in, give people a good picture of it?
Yes, well, Patagonia is mythical, isn't it? There have been books written about it, and people have their dream to go to Patagonia. Even Argentinians have a dream to come to Patagonia. And the part that we live in is only a small part of Patagonia, which is basically all of the Argentinian side of the border and the Chilean side from the south of Buenos Aires to the south tip of the continent. So it's a massive area. So that the part that we live in is the province of Chubut. And so that's kind of in the middle, really, 42 degrees south, if that means anything to anybody. And it's an absolutely huge space. The province in itself, I think the population density is something like 1 person per square kilometre or 1.5 people per square kilometre. Whereas, back in Britain, we're on 250 people per square kilometre. So first of all, it's a very empty space, but absolutely beautiful because you've got the coast on the east, with all the animals that you would expect to find, including penguins, some of the most northerly penguins in the world. And then you come across what is basically steppe, which reaches a height of about 1,000 meters. So it's very high, very windy, very windswept. Not many trees on that part. And then you carry on your journey upwards and you reach the Andes, which at this level are around 2,000 meters. The highest mountains that we've got here near to us, I think it's just over 2,000, 2,200 meters, something like that. So there's an incredible difference between the west and the east of the country. And even in the steppe, which you think, what grows in the steppe? There are animals, there are ostrich, there are guanaco, which are the llamas that live down here. And there are farms, the classic sheep farm of Patagonia is still there, and people are still working there. So it's an incredible space with very different ecosystems from the west to the east.
Amazing. And I must say, I had the wonderful opportunity to actually visit a little bit of Patagonia several years ago when I was living in Uruguay and made a trip there. And we flew from Buenos Aires to Bariloche, which was amazing. It was fascinating. It was a bit. I thought it was a bit like what you'd find for me in the Lake District, with beautiful lakes and mountains, but on a scale of 10 times higher and 10 times bigger than anything I'd seen in the Lake District. But wonderful.
Yes, that's it. People say to me, is Trevelin, which is where I live, is it like Wales? And I suppose it is in as much as there's water and it's green, and here there are forests and mountains. But yes, they're like super steroid mountains. They're much bigger than what we've got back home in Wales.
Yeah, and then we decided to take a we wanted to go down to Perito Moreno, which is a famous glacier, and we decided to take a bus there. And it took us 24 hours to take a bus there, and the road there was like one road, and I thought it was going to be more sort of diverse in the terms of what we'd be able to see out the window, but it was like desert on the left,
Exactly.
desert on the right. But it was a fascinating trip and well worth it.
Yes, yeah, that kind of bus journey is very common here, because it used to be the cheapest way of getting around. It's definitely not the quickest. And yes, I've heard people say that you go on the bus because you'll be able to see things, but there is a limit to how much emptiness you can take in, isn't it?
Yeah, but I highly recommend it. If anyone out there listening fancies going to Patagonia, I think it's a wonderful experience and just a beautiful place to visit, really.
Yeah, definitely. Of course, I'm a fan.
Of course, yeah. You've been there, 18 years, is that right?
I have, yes. I came for a year, and I fell in love with the place, first of all, before falling in love with one of its inhabitants. So, yes, I can't believe that so much time has passed. But
fantastic.
Yeah, I feel quite a local.
Of course. Well, before I get into your work teaching Welsh and working with local and other teachers who come from Wales, I'd like to ask you just about you becoming a teacher and how I always ask my guests this, how it was that you became interested in education and becoming involved in teaching.
Well, I used to love school. I was one of those nerdy people who always enjoyed school. And the thing that I enjoyed most of all were languages. In my family, we're Welsh. My mother's surname was Williams and my dad's is Vaughan. So, we've got good pedigree. But unfortunately, the language was lost somewhere along the line and not passed on from one generation to the next. And so when I went to school, I had the opportunity to learn it and to regain that part of my ancestry. And so I from quite an early age, I enjoyed the idea of passing the knowledge that I was gaining on to other people. And so I went to university. I did a degree in Welsh language and literature. And to be quite honest, I remember thinking, well, what am I going to do with my life now? And it seemed a good idea to stay on for an extra year and do the teaching certificate, the PGCE, which I did. And I ended up in a job in my old school, which was very strange. But I just loved language teaching from the beginning. And as I say, that thing of passing on to others what you've learned yourself is a great privilege. So I did that for quite a few years, and I had several changes in my personal life. And I thought, am I going to be sitting here marking exam scripts until I retire? There must be more out there. And I started looking at jobs, and one was to go to China to teach English. And I actually went to an open day, and I thought, this is a bit too different. Whereas if I could do something to do with English or Welsh teaching, it would be more in my field. And lo and behold, an advertisement came out in one of the Welsh newspapers. Do you want a challenge? Why not go to teach Welsh in Patagonia? And I thought, that's perfect. It's something I feel really at home doing, which is teaching Welsh, but in a different place, which will be completely new to me. And so that's how I came here. And that's basically, I've always been a teacher. It's what I love doing. And I hope I can keep doing it for many years to come.
Fabulous. That's quite a story. And so was it that you arrived in Patagonia and thought, yes, this is where I want to be. I'm going to stay here? Or was it more of a case of You went for a year, you thought, I'll stay for another year, and then circumstances meant that you have ended up staying for 18. Was it, what was it? Which of the two was it, or was it something else?
Yeah, I remember when I got the job, I got a phone call because I actually wasn't at home, and they left a message on the answering machine which said, "Congratulations, you're going to the Andes." And I remember thinking, I have absolutely no idea where this, I knew where the Andes were, obviously, but I didn't have an idea what the communities were like and so on. And I can remember coming into Buenos Aires on the plane on my first visit thinking, what have I done? Where am I going? I have no idea. But the very first afternoon that I arrived, some very nice people from the community came and picked me up from the airport. And of course, they were speaking Welsh. And this was just like the craziest thing, because you can imagine, Buenos Aires is one of the biggest cities, the biggest city in South America now. And, all the craziness of the city. And then I ended up in Esquel Airport with these people speaking Welsh. And they took me for tea. They'd prepared a tea for me. And the kind of high tea that we don't have anymore in Britain.
Yes.
Well, maybe at posh restaurants and things, but, at your grandma's house where there were sandwiches with the crusts cut off and cakes, homemade cakes. Well, it was exactly that. And I remember thinking, gosh, I felt straight away at home. I didn't feel such a stranger in a strange place. So I think I settled very quickly in that respect, because I was with people who looked Welsh, spoke Welsh, had a lot of the cultural references that we had, and yet they were Argentinian. And so that is a very interesting situation, because you get lulled into this false sense of security, that these people are exactly like me. And that's not the case, because they are South Americans, they are Latinos. But I loved my first year. I loved all the opportunities that I got. I was teaching anything between children from 3 years upwards to adults who had never had a Welsh lesson in their lives and yet were absolutely fluent. And I had an old lady who was 82 who came to my classes the first time that she'd ever seen any Welsh, written Welsh, apart from the Bible, and so it was fascinating. And I thought, yeah, this is what I needed, a whole shake-up of everything that I was doing as a teacher, and very challenging, trying to cover all bases. But they asked me to stay for a second year, and I said yes straight away. And at the end of that year, there'd been very little response to the jobs, which I can't understand, because this is a fabulous opportunity for anybody who wants to just have a change, that thing of doing what you feel confident doing, but in a different environment. And so they asked me to stay for another year. And yes, that was the year that I met my now husband. So yes, it was a little bit of that, but I did feel very at home straight away.
Fantastic. That's amazing. And a mutual friend of ours, Martin Ayres, sent me a link to an article he wrote, which was fascinating, about the origins of how this Welsh community and the first settlers ended up being there. And I think in that article, he kind of finishes with this idea of the identity of the Welsh-speaking Argentinians there is very much Argentinian nowadays, which maybe wasn't the case generations in the past. Is that something that you can identify with? Do you think that how is the kind of Welsh Argentinian identity of the people there?
It's a very interesting question, isn't it? Because when the Welsh came here, there were some native people living here in a nomadic kind of existence, but they were isolated culturally, socially, which was actually what they wanted. They wanted to keep the language, to keep their customs, to keep the religion, the Protestant faith. They brought those things with them, and by being geographically isolated, they succeeded in keeping them. However, the Argentinian government Argentina is a relatively young country, got its independence from Spain in 1810. And so, it's still in formation. And one of the things that the Argentinian government were trying to do was one country, one language, and therefore one culture. And so the Welsh tried to fight against that to a certain degree. But of course, when the Argentinian government saw the success that was being made of Chubut as a farming region, they brought in national schools, and the language of the national schools was Spanish. And so you had this kind of the two cultures coming together. And of course, what happens when you're 5 years old and you go to school and it's the first time you hear Spanish, which is what happened not so far ago. I've got pupils now who are in their 70s, and that was their experience, that at home they spoke Welsh, but when they went to school, they spoke Spanish for the first time. And of course, it was a thing of embarrassment that they didn't understand what the teacher was saying to them, and so on. And so that's when Welsh began to lose a little bit of its ground, because the families realized that to avoid their children's distress, it would be good for them to speak Spanish. And of course, the language slowly began to turn to Spanish. We're one nation, we're under one flag, so therefore we need one language. And so there is a little bit of this kind of duality, because a lot of the values that the Welsh brought with them are still here. There are 3 bilingual Welsh Spanish schools in Chubut now. And one of the things that they're very keen to emphasize is the fact that they've got these kind of values like cooperation and working together and overcoming difficulties by hard work, so there's kind of, without the language, there are other things that are part of the culture too. But people do consider themselves Argentinian first and foremost, obviously. Sometimes people come from Wales with the idea that they're going to meet Welsh people. Well, no, they were Welsh people 150 years ago, but they're now Argentinians with this extra culture, if you like. And so we had the Rugby World Cup not so long ago, didn't we? And Wales and Argentina were against each other. Well, that was very difficult. Which side are we going to support,
I can imagine. What about in your family? Was it divided, or were you firmly behind Wales?
No, definitely divided. I was for Wales and my husband was for Argentina. So we kind of said before the match, we'll be happy whichever side wins. But as the Pumas, as the Argentinians won, I was a little bit disappointed.
I can imagine. That's fascinating. And so what about the motivation to learn Welsh? Is there a strong motivation to carry on the language and culture, to keep it alive? Or is that something you have to work hard with?
No, one of the things that tired me of being a teacher in Northeast Wales was the fact that you're so close to the border. There were pupils who came from England, and so you'd get why do I have to learn Welsh? And for me, first of all, why learn any language? We could all probably speak English, and we could go around the world, and we'd be fine. So why learn any language? There is a value, an intrinsic value in learning a language. And of course, here there is absolutely no economic reason to learn Welsh. You're not going to get a better job if you speak Welsh. But I see that the people are very connected through their family history. I'd say there's 3 motivations. If you can have a plural of motivation, there are 3 things that motivate people. I would say one would be the families that did speak Welsh a couple of generations ago, and are sorry that they've lost that, and so they are coming back. The Evanses, the Robertses, the Thomases, the Owens. So that's something that's very heart based, isn't it? It's in their heart. Then you've got people where we live in Trevelyan, for example. There is a huge movement from some of the larger cities. People looking for a quieter life, looking for a better place to raise their children. And they choose this Welsh town and they think, oh, that's interesting. There's something going on here. Oh, they've got dance groups that do Welsh dancing, and there's a choir that sings Welsh songs. And, oh, I want to learn about this. And they come into classes with that kind of interest. And then you get those who are probably speak English already and say, oh, another language, let me learn this. Maybe they speak Portuguese as well. Or, and so they come into classes from the linguistic point of view. So I'd say that those are the three groups of people that we're seeing. And of course, then they send their children to the Welsh Spanish schools.
Wow. Which of those three motivations, I'm going to continue using the plural, is the most important, or the most people have, do you think?
Yeah, I would say this connection with the past and with the history of the province, because it was the Welsh who came here first. It was them who battled against the climate and the landscape to make a future. And so I think that's the one that people do recognize, and you can be in a taxi in Buenos Aires and say you're from Chubut, and the taxi driver will say, oh yes, that's a Welsh colony, isn't it? Of course, nowadays we don't use the word colony, it's a settlement.
Yes.
But yes, but people do know about it, and it's something that connects them to the past, but also in modern day times. We've got quite a lot of connections with Wales, with Britain. And one of the biggest ones is tourism. There are many
Right.
tourists who have grown up in Wales listening to these stories about this place over the sea where people speak Welsh. And one of their dreams is to visit this place. As I said, Patagonia is quite mythical. And so a lot of people save up for years to come out and experience it for themselves. And what I love when you meet these people is that they can't believe there's so much Welsh. It's not something that you're going to hear on the street necessarily, but if you know the right people, you can end up going to chapel, you can end up going for a beer, you can end up having supper, you can end up getting invited to go for a drive in the car. If you meet the right people, you can have a totally Welsh experience. And so when the tourist groups come over, that's what we try to do, to give them the whole show, if you like. But it's an introduction to the life that we live here.
Amazing. And what about the other way? Do the people that live in the Welsh settlements in Patagonia have a desire or to go and visit the homeland, to go to Wales?
Oh. Yes, that's a dream for a lot of people here. I don't know if the listeners are up to date on the what's happening in Argentina this year.
Oh, yes.
But we've reached 102% inflation, I think.
Yeah.
So it means that everything is like twice as expensive as it was a couple of months ago. So the idea of getting an airfare and going over to Europe is a privilege that not everybody can run to. But what is great is that through the links that we have with Wales, there are possibilities for scholarships. So, for example, there is a Welsh Argentine Society, and they work with the British Council on the project that I work on. And there are 3 scholarships offered every year for students to go and
that's great.
improve their Welsh. Yes. So that's great. And then there's a new scholarship that's happened in the last couple of years, which is for somebody to go, not to just to sit in Welsh classes or meet people, but to actually work. So we had somebody who works for the TV here, and they went to Wales and had like placements in different television companies and on the radio, and so that was a great experience. And it just creates links that forges friendships, really.
That's fabulous. That's really, really good to hear. And yes, it's a shame about the hyperinflation in Argentina, which has meant that it's less likely for people to be able to go other than with scholarships, etc., as you say.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the case. It's made it quite an attractive place for people from Europe, but
Yes.
unfortunately, we don't. But it's important that visitors come here as well, because that gives the learners a real reason to learn Welsh. Because when the visitors come, they can try out their Welsh, whatever level they're on. You know, they can practice their questions and they can speak to real people. I think now I'm not really considered a real person in that sense. They see me as too much part of the Argentina. So
Well,
when people come from Wales,
that's a good
it's a
thing in a
good,
way, because it means you're very integrated into the society and
yes,
culture.
yes. Sometimes I think a little too relaxed. You know, the Latino thing of not having plans and just seeing what happens. I'm going to Wales soon for the Christmas holidays, and
Right.
I'm thinking I really ought to make some plans, because I know that in Britain people are very driven by the timetable, and you know, we can see you on Friday between 8 and so I think I might have to become a little less Argentine. Oh, how would you say that in English? A little less Argentinian, yeah.
Argentinian, yeah. Yes. And what about the variety between the Welsh that is spoken in Wales and the Welsh that is spoken in Patagonia? Is there much, if any, difference in accent or vocabulary, etc.?
That's an interesting question. The people who spoke Welsh as children, they still have that vocabulary that they heard in their homes, you know, so it's a very
Yeah.
homely kind of Welsh. So the names of puddings or the names of fruits are things that they've learnt there. And what is interesting is quite a lot of them are in English. And that would be because when the first settlers came out, English was the language of schooling. And so
Right.
they learnt, you know, peaches, plums, pears. They learnt that kind of vocabulary through school. And of course, these people don't necessarily speak English here. They may speak Welsh and Spanish, but not English, which again is incredible to think that there is a place in the world where English is not king. But they swear that peaches is a Welsh word because their grandmother used it, you know, and that must be Welsh.
So what is the
There's
Welsh
another one.
for peaches?
Oh, it's a hard word. It's gellig.
Geshig. Okay.
Gellig, yeah, with that the aspirate in the middle.
Right.
So that's interesting. And there is a word in Wales. We are a very small country. We have 2,750,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're a very small culture, and yet we have lots of different words for the same thing. So I don't know if you've heard of Welsh cakes, but they are a delicacy that we have. Yes, you'd remember if you tried one. They're very, very buttery kind of griddle scone. So they're done on a griddle. And there are different names for them depending on where you come from.
Okay.
So I would say Cacenau Cri, and then my friend who lives down the road would say Picar Mine, and then somebody else would say Teshenol Bach. And some people even use Welsh cakes in Welsh. And it's interesting that the people here say Teshenod Bach hen fashion, little old-fashioned cakes.
I love it. That's amazing.
Yes, it's great. So yes, and then of course the new learners, so people who've not had that Welsh background in their families or at home, they're learning from the courses that we use in Wales with adult learners. So, you know, the European levels. And we tend to use the North Walian version because there are two versions, a North Walian and a South Walian. Welsh is not divided quite so neatly as that, but we found that it's more North Walian than South Walian. You know, the people who came out, there must have been some strong characters from North Wales, and they kind of put the stamp on the Welsh. So when we teach the new learners, we try to teach them a Welsh that reflects the language that was spoken here very widely until recently, with a few exceptions. There are some words that they wouldn't. For example, we have two words in Welsh for like. One is hoffi, and the other one is licio. Well, licio has come from the English, as far as I'm concerned. So I would prefer to use hoffi. It's more authentic. And it's interesting that people here would not use licio. Naturally, I've never heard anybody use that. They would use hoffi. So that's a more South Walian thing. So it's an interesting mix, fascinating. And Dr. Iwan Rees from Cardiff University has been out here to do some investigation into the accent and where the words come from. So he's given us some help in adapting the courses that we use from Wales so that they do reflect the language of Chubut, the language of Patagonia.
It's fascinating. I think it's great that there's a kind of variety that is Patagonian Welsh actually as well. It makes it sort of a living language, doesn't it?
Yes, that's another thing that people do, of course. They translate like we do it in Welsh in Wales, we use the English word. Well, here they use the Spanish word. So if somebody wants you to come into their house, they would say pashuch from pasar in Spanish, meaning to come in. And so they've, little things like that. And if somebody says diolch, thank you, the answer would be croeso in Wales. You'd say you're welcome. People here say does rhaid I chi ddim, no hay por qué. There's no need. So
love it.
Little things like that. Yes, very interesting.
That's fantastic. And well, what about the actual teaching, Claire? Do you said before that you teach quite a big age range. Do you teach, or do you have people who come over from Wales, etc., or the local teachers teach in schools and adults as well? Is it kind of a typical range for teachers to be teaching primary, secondary, etc., and adults, or is it do people specialise?
Yeah, so the Welsh project, which is funded by the Welsh government, and it's managed by the British Council because they have a lot of experience in these things, sending people off around the world, advertise for 3 teachers for every academic year from Wales. And the idea is that they will come with their different specialities and they will help the people who are here on the ground doing the hard work. And what you often find is that people do a little bit of everything. Yes. I can think of people who work in a primary school during the day and then they teach the adults in the evening. So that's quite common because the people who are teaching Welsh are not necessarily teachers. That's a bit awkward. Right. But
you mean the people who come or the people who are teaching?
Yes, the people, the locals, if you like, the local tutors. They're very often people who've learnt Welsh very well, and so they want to pass it on to others.
Right.
And so they're in the situation. But I have to say, I think if you've got if your heart's in the subject, it's a good start. And so part of my job is trying to mentor and monitor the local tutors. And give them a hand. They've got the courses which are very detailed, and so just give them tips on how to teach them. And that was a great thing about now that it's over. The pandemic had its bonuses, and one of those is that we could meet every week and do a session on some element of teaching that maybe people had never thought about before. You learn a language yourself, and if you're a good language learner, you probably don't analyze what you did and how. And so that was an opportunity to do that. And it's sad, really, that since we've gone back to normal life, whatever that might be, people are so busy because there are, obviously a minority who can speak Welsh, and so they are the ones who are wanted in the Welsh Association and in the Welsh dancing group and in the school, and so there's a big demand on their time. So the idea is that these 3 teachers come from Wales and work alongside the local tutors to share the best practice that they can. Of course, now we've got 3 Welsh Spanish primary schools. We've got staff who are just involved in the schools from all day. They're in the classroom, trying to immerse the students in as much Welsh as they can in the timetable, as the timetable will allow. And so we do need people to come from Wales and bring their expertise with them, because it's very difficult for teachers in Argentina to have continuing professional development. I don't see that there is a big emphasis on that, not in Chubut at least. I mean, maybe in the bigger cities there is a lot more interest paid to it, but here in Chubut, unfortunately, the education system has been run down, and so we're dealing with that kind of fallout, as well as trying to motivate and support. So yes, it's quite a challenge.
I can imagine. And you said that it was difficult when you first came over, that to get enough Welsh teachers. That some years, the second year, you said that you stayed on. One of the reasons was because they couldn't find someone to actually come over. Is that still the case, or is it quite a popular thing now?
Well, it's again, I think the pandemic has had an effect on that. I guess I get the feeling that people, instead of saying, I've only got one chance, I want to get out there and live all the experiences that I can, they've actually become quite homebirds and not quite so confident about traveling. So I think that's put a lot of people off. And of course, in Britain, it's nothing like the 100 and odd % inflation that we have here, but there is inflation. And so people who would be quite happy to come out think of, I've got a mortgage to pay, I've got a car to pay off, and so the financial insecurity doesn't help, because of course when you advertise one of these jobs, you're advertising it with a local salary. Well, that at the moment is £750 a month, which, if you look at it like that, that's somebody's mortgage payment probably. So that isn't attractive. What you don't realise is that makes you a king here. With £750 a month, you can basically enjoy yourself, So it's hard to get that over to people as well. And it's not just the money, is it? It's the experience. I can't imagine what my life would have been like without having this opportunity. And the 99% of the people who come out on these jobs, they absolutely love it. And, it's really hard for them to go back, to leave what they've started. And many have done in 2 years, which is great, because I honestly think you do better in your second year when you know how things work and you know who to refer to and all the rest. So, I would say probably we end up with quite young candidates who haven't yet got into all the house owning and credit card payments. Or people who are at the other end of their careers that are maybe taking early retirement, but they still feel they've got some energy and they would like to use it in our project. So that's what we're seeing at the moment is those two extremes, and it would be quite nice to have some people in the middle.
Of course, but what you say makes a lot of sense. What about people who come over and, as you did, fall in love with the place and decide they want to stay? Are there opportunities to do that, or is it quite strict, as in after 2 years there should be someone else coming in?
Yes, I think one of the things that is difficult about the project is this constant turnover of people. But I think one of the beauties of the project is this constant turnover of the people. There's two sides to everything. And it's great for the students to develop a relationship with people because they react in a different way. Argentinians are super sociable, they love getting together, they love getting to know new people. It's not unusual that you meet somebody at the bus stop and end up going for a meal with them. They just love talking to people. So from that point of view, now why was I saying that? I've forgotten where I was going with that. Oh yes, so if you stay for more than 1 year, you probably make friends for life. So that's really nice. But it's also good for the students to have different accents, different teachers with different skills. Sometimes people will put an emphasis on something and maybe not pay attention to pronunciation, for example, whereas another teacher will come along and they will be very keen on it. Something strange that happened that I will mention during the pandemic, we had 3 teachers. It was like the dream team.
Wow.
We had a primary specialist, we had an adult specialist, and we had a lady who'd worked with nursery children but was working in a secondary school. So it was like fantastic. And of course they came out in February and by March Argentina was closing its borders because the pandemic had arrived. And 2 of the 3 decided to go home. And one of them optimistically said, I'm sure it'll be over in a few months. I'll stay. And so basically she spent the year holed up in her flat in Trelew, which is the other side of the province from the Andes. It's the Dyffryn, the valley, the Lower Chubut Valley. But we had to reinvent ourselves. And so she ended up doing classes online. And the great thing was that when she went back to Wales, she could still carry on doing classes online. And this developed into a YouTube channel, which if people are learning Welsh or learning Spanish, it works very well because it's called Gales con Marian. And Marian does these little videos on different elements of the language. And I think one of the things she did was learn Welsh in 10 lessons, something basic to get people started. So that was another good thing from the pandemic. And it had a consistency, that people could carry on with Marian afterwards, which is an advantage of teaching online, of course.
Oh, wow, that's great. I've just looked it up and there it is. Yeah, Gales con Marian. That's interesting. I'll explore that a little bit further and watch some of those videos. Thanks for sharing that. That's great. So you were able to switch, talking about the pandemic, you were able to switch quite easily to teaching people online. Did people have the equipment, the connectivity to be able to do that? Or was it, as in most of the world, quite a challenge and problematic?
Oh yes, to begin with, it was terrible because everybody went online, and our internet here is not even fiber optic. It's kind of big satellite dishes that beam it out to little receivers. So depending on the weather, if it's windy or rainy, the signal is bad. And what we found, we tried to do with the primary school kids, but it just didn't work. Online it's very difficult to make it work for children, I think. And a lot of the children, if they had the opportunity, went off to the farm to stay with grandparents or what have you. So they were out of internet reach anyway. But what we did see were a lot of adults joining because they had time on their hands and they wanted to do something useful. And so we did make this change. And of course, I had never heard of Zoom until we suddenly had to turn all our classes into virtual ones. But it was great because what we found was not only were we teaching people in Chubut, but people who had left here to go to university, they were available. And people who'd settled in Buenos Aires, they were all of a sudden they could learn Welsh, and it's fantastic. We also do the WJC exams for adults, the Welsh exams, and this year we had 3 people come from Buenos Aires to sit them, and 1 girl from Uruguay. You'd be pleased to hear, from Montevideo. So that was a benefit. Yes, so it meant that we could spread our wings a bit more. So that was great.
That's great. So there is an interest in learning Welsh in outside of Argentina as well, in other parts of South America, is there, that you know of?
Yes, yes. There's quite a big community in Chile who would like to be able to attend classes, online.
Is that
So
because of proximity and because they've maybe visited and have kind of saw something they
no,
thought we want, or is it something else?
there is a historical reason. So where we live in Trevelyan, in 1902, there was a situation that the border hadn't been defined between Chile and Argentina. In 1902,
Right.
this was not so
Okay.
long ago.
Wow.
And it was almost going to come to a military situation. And so the government invited a person from England who was going to be the referee. what would you say? A person from
referee.
Chile, and Perito Moreno, who was the person who provided the evidence for Argentina. So basically, they said the high mountains should be the division. And the Chileans said, no, it should be the division of waters, the watershed. If the water goes to the Pacific, the land is Chile, and if it goes to the Atlantic, it's Argentina. Well, that's not very, you can't really trust that because it's possible to change the direction of water and so on. And of course, where we are, all our water goes to the Pacific, which is incredible, but it goes round and through the Andes to the Pacific. So Argentina would have lost this huge amount of land. So basically, Sir Thomas Holditch said, this land belongs to Argentina. And what do the local people think about that? And of course, the local people who were Welsh had all their relatives down in Gaiman and so on. And they put their hands up, a show of hands, that they were happy with that decision. But there were a couple of families who didn't want to be part of Argentina anymore because they felt that they hadn't been given all the things that the government had said to entice them to come here. Mm-hmm. And Chile was offering double the land. If somebody went over to Chile and settled, they would get twice the amount of land that they would have in Argentina. So a few families went over to Chile, and from that, this other settlement was born, which I've only recently read about. And no, it's incredible. So there are Welsh families in Chile as well.
And are they as vibrant as the ones in Patagonia in Argentina, or is that not the case?
Not yet. I think they've just begun to make connections with their cousins in Argentina. So no, as far as I know, it's a very small group at the moment. But you never know.
Sounds like there's an opportunity there for the project that runs the sending the teachers from Wales to do the same in Chile, maybe in the future.
Exactly. That would be great, wouldn't it? That would be another experience altogether.
Amazing. And I take it you haven't visited this place yet?
No, not yet. We live 35 kilometers from the border with Chile. And in the early days of the project, when I was a teacher, we didn't have visas because the Argentinian visa system is terrible. So it just meant a little hop over the border to the nearest town for a coffee and then back again to get your stamp.
Right, okay.
Since I've been married, obviously, I can stay here. And I haven't been to Chile for about 4 years, and it's only 35 kilometers away. So it would be good to make some links so that I would have a reason to go over there.
Yeah, sounds good. And so how was it that you moved away from being a teacher and towards mentoring the teachers who were coming over? Was it a natural progression? Was it something that you were attracted to do? How did you get involved in that?
Right. So when I was a teacher, I was the only Welsh person here on this side of the country. I had 2 colleagues who were here for a year as well, one in Gaiman and one in Trelew, but that's 600 miles away. So it was a little bit lonesome. And at that time, the international education projects department didn't really have a lot to do with the Welsh. It was a more of a administrative role than a caring role.
So the teachers were sent over and sort of left to their own devices, were they?
Pretty much so, yes. There is a person here called Lynette Gonzalez, who, if anybody has been to Patagonia, they've probably met her. She's now in her late 80s, but she has been a powerhouse of the project, and she has been a mentor to everybody who's come here. But of course, she's Argentinian, and so sometimes there are things that you feel, only somebody who comes from Wales would understand the frustration with queues, for example. Why do we have to do such long queues for everything? The Argentinians must love queuing because they will stand in this queue for hours. And,
For a moment there, Claire, I thought you were talking about Q, the letter, and I was trying to work out whether Q, the pronunciation of Q, was very problematic.
Oops.
now I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yes. So when I finished my third year of teaching, and quite rightly let somebody else have a go at it, the academic monitor of the project at that point said it would be good to have somebody as an annex between Wales and Argentina who understands the teaching and can help, both teachers who come from Wales and the local teachers. So that's when I began to do that. And as far as teaching goes, I've always kept my hand in, because the local tutors are brilliant. They teach classes for very little recognition, and they do it because of the love of the language and so on. But they get scared when they get to C1 and C2 level, and they say,
why is that?
We don't feel sufficiently fluent or confident to teach that, which is understandable in a way, because they're using their language very often with school pupils. So the demand for the grammar and the vocabulary that goes with a higher level is not there. So I've ended up teaching a group, a C2 group, and it's fantastic because again, it's a pyramid, isn't it? When you start language learning, there are a lot of people start off on the journey, and then the next year they realize how hard it is, and it gets smaller and smaller. Well, of course, the pyramid hasn't allowed the small communities here to have a C2 group. There might be a person or two people who want to learn at that level. Even though there are more people who speak at that level, but to actually study is another thing, isn't it? And again, going online has meant that we've been able to get those people together. So you mentioned Bariloche before. One of our pupils is in Bariloche. There's one in Esquel, two in Trevelyan, somebody in Gaiman, somebody in Portmadryn. So we cover the whole province and peek a little bit into the next province. And it's fantastic. It's such an enjoyable class because we've got people who are speakers but have never studied, and especially not at that level. And we've got teachers who are teaching and want to improve their Welsh to be able to teach better. So it's very satisfying to still have that contact with the teaching. So I enjoy that.
That's great. And earlier on in our conversation, Claire, you mentioned something about Welsh dancing, I think it was.
Yes.
I wondered about apart from the language, what are the kind of cultural practices and the Welsh cakes, of course, are going on. Do you find that there's a lot of interest in Welsh culture as well? And how does that manifest itself?
Yes. Well, one of the things that the Welsh brought with them was obviously the chapel. And so throughout the province of Chubut, there are Welsh chapels in the valley and over here in the Andes. and they still have services in them. Not every week, but on a monthly basis, they would be used for that. So that's one thing that people get involved in. Then there are dance groups in each of the places in Trevelyan-Isgel, Porthmadryn, Gaiman, Trelew. There are dancing groups, which is great because it's an expression of Welsh culture. It's a way of learning, some vocabulary and just having good fun, because Argentinians love to dance too. And it's not just tango. So the dance groups are very well supported. There are choirs, again, who sing in Welsh and Spanish. And still do the old hymns and so on. We have singing festivals called Caman Vagani, which people meet in the chapel to sing hymns. We still have those here in Patagonia. And the Eisteddfod. I don't know if you or the listeners know the Eisteddfod.
I don't.
It's the Welsh cultural festival. So we have in Wales, most towns would have their own Eisteddfod, and there is a national Eisteddfod once a year. And it's just about everything that you can do in Welsh. The stage competitions have singing, dancing, recitation, instrumental music, solos, choirs. The big prizes are given for poetry, so poetry that is written by the bard, and there are different prizes. There is a chair, which is one of the prizes for written poetry. Another one is the crown, and then there is a medal for the best novel. So that happens in Wales, and of course the Welsh settlers brought that with them, and so we have Eisteddfod here in Patagonia. So the Trevelyan Eisteddfod happens in April. There is a Porthmadryn Eisteddfod in August. There is a youth Eisteddfod in September, and there is a Chubut Eisteddfod where we all get together in October. And so it's absolutely fantastic because you have this mix of Welsh culture, Welsh songs and Welsh dancing and recitation. And then you have the similar thing in Spanish. And so there is a tango competition, and then there is a folk dancing, Argentinian folk dancing competition. So I think I like that fusion of culture very much, because I think, people may have this idea that Wales is somewhere where the history is set like this and it's not changing. It's changing all the time. And, in order to survive, you have to, I was going to say mutate. No, that's the wrong word, isn't it?
Transform or adapt.
Yes, adapt. Yeah. So that's it. You can't fight against the changes. And so here in Argentina, in Chubut, in Patagonia, the Eisteddfod has done that. It's incorporated, the best from two cultures and put it together, and it's a wonderful festival. So if you're ever down in Patagonia in Trelew in October, it's a long weekend of culture, which is great. I love it.
Fantastic, wonderful. And Claire, moving to your own personal interest in languages and learning languages. It's clear that you're very passionate about not only Welsh, but the idea of learning languages, the benefits of studying and speaking other languages as a English, Welsh and Spanish speaker. And you told me that you've also studied French and Portuguese. What would you say to people who might be interested in learning another language? How should they go ahead and get started, etc.?
Well, it's interesting because you mentioned the three languages that I use on a daily basis, which I think I'm incredibly privileged to be able to do that. And it does make life interesting, I have to say. Sometimes I find I can't find the word in any of the three languages, but anyway, that's by the by. My experiences of learning those languages, each one was different, because obviously I learned English in my family. It was my mother tongue.
Yeah.
I learnt Welsh in a school situation, so quite formal. And at that time, it was learning the verb conjugations like a parrot, and repeating them. Rydw I, rwy ti, mai o, mai hi, rydyn ni, rydych chi, mein nhw. Which is another way of doing it. And then my third experience was learning Spanish here by living the language, because I came out here with a very small smattering of tourism Spanish. So I could ask where the hotel was, but I wasn't sure if you gave me an answer whether I'd be able to follow the directions. And each of the experiences were very different, and they had their advantages and disadvantages. I think depending on the person, some people like the mathematical learning the verbs and all the verb tenses. And I thought I was like that until I started learning Spanish, and I realized that my necessity to communicate outweighed my embarrassment at not being able to conjugate verbs correctly. And and so I rapidly lost my embarrassment and just tried to forge ahead. And so I think I would say to anybody, find something that makes you feel, yes, I'm learning, I'm progressing, whether that's a class, whether it's an online class, a face-to-face class, because not everybody adapted to online classes either. Some people need that personal one-to-one or face-to-face, and other people don't, and it depends. But the one thing I would say is, if you're going to make a use of it, you've got to want to communicate. And however little you've got, use it. Because I see some people say, I can't put a sentence together like I can in Spanish. But that's okay, because you only need to be able to put these 5 words together, and you're saying something to somebody in another language, And I think Argentina, because of that thing of one language, one country, it doesn't seem to have a huge emphasis on bilingualism. In fact, our bilingual schools in Chubut are not officially bilingual schools, according to the government. They are multicultural schools. So, this idea of learning another language is, for some people, it's quite a novel idea. But I would say, in Wales, for example, we can all speak English. Nowadays it would be very, very strange if you could find somebody who was so locked away from culture, modern culture and social media and so on, that they couldn't speak English. Well, here it's the same, that everybody speaks Spanish. And so, why bother learning Welsh? But you have to put yourself into that situation and pretend that you can't do it any other way, and use what you've got. However little that might be, just go for it. And the other thing that I like about Argentinians, they laugh with you. I don't think they laugh at you. No. I can remember very early on, I wanted to play some board games with my students when I was a teacher here in Escal. Yeah. And so I learned the word for dice from the dictionary, and I walked around to the toy shop, and I said in my best Spanish, yo quiero dedos. And the guy behind, yes, you understand Spanish. So
yeah.
The guy behind the counter looked at me with a kind of suspicious look, and he said, ¿Cómo? What? And I was sure that I'd learned this word properly. So I told him again, dedos. And he burst out laughing and kind of wiggled his fingers at me and said, these are dedos. What you want are dados. And, just one little vowel of difference. And I'd made a fool of myself. But the fact that he laughed, it just broke the ice of that moment. And I've never forgotten the word for fingers or the word for dice. That was one of the first things I learned. And I think...
Anyone learning Spanish, I was going to say, anyone learning Spanish kind of sometimes, well, a lot of people learning Spanish make the mistake of putting the wrong vowel on the end of the word for chicken in Spanish, which is very
Uh-huh.
embarrassing.
Ah,
And
right.
you never forget that. Yeah,
No.
the translation is very different.
Yes. No, but I think nowadays the idea of being bilingual or more than bilingual is something more common, isn't it? And
Yeah,
I'm glad to be part of that
yeah.
majority who speak more than one language.
It seems that there's sort of a real polarization that I can see. There is a kind of increase in interest in learning languages, and you just see from the proliferation of language learning apps, for example,
Mm,
there's a need, but then there's also this other group of people, I think, who are really, they think that it's not necessary anymore because
mm,
perhaps that technology is advancing sufficiently that maybe we'll get to the point where we can use automatic translation on our phones or through some other way.
mm.
I don't know what you think about that.
Oh, I find that a very scary prospect because
Mm.
the most fantastic computer, as far as I'm concerned, is the human brain, and
Yeah.
the benefits of learning languages have been proven. You know,
Oh yeah.
the staving off Alzheimer's and things like that, and just in general, you know, I feel switching from one language to another keeps me ticking over, and the
I
idea that
feel the same way.
the idea that artificial intelligence might replace that, I think that's a scary prospect. And
Yeah.
at the, yeah,
I don't think it will, to be honest. I kind of veer on the side of the optimistic side because I think it's not just about being able to uh, automatically put out of your mouth
mm,
words in a different foreign language. It's that richness, it's that feeling that, if you do invest the time in learning a language and practicing it, then it the benefits not only for the brain but the way you feel and think changes as well.
yes,
So I
and here the idea of you're part of a community, you know, by speaking that language, you're in this tribe, you know, and this tribe, this Welsh tribe, is here in Argentina and in Wales and in other places around the world where there are pockets of people who speak the language.
of
And
course.
that's much more important than the actual what you say, isn't it? It's the whole relationship that you build by saying it, and I see this all the time. The other day, my husband is a tour guide. He works with
Mhm.
tourists, and he was in the national park here. We have a beautiful national park. I'll put in a plug for it, Los Alerces. It has some of the oldest trees on the planet in it.
Wonderful.
And he was walking down a path, and coming towards him were these people who were obviously Welsh. He has seen enough Welsh people to know. And
Yeah.
so, even though he doesn't speak Welsh, he greeted them in Welsh and said, "Hello, Pnawn." And these people, their jaws dropped, you know, that you're in the middle of this Patagonian forest and this Argentinian greets you in Welsh. And he said they stopped and they wanted to chat with him and they wanted a photograph with him because they couldn't believe that they. And
Yeah.
so it's so much more than just words, isn't
Oh
it?
yeah. You're never going to get that reaction if you do that using a machine attached to your ear or mouth,
Exactly.
etc. Are you? Yeah.
No, definitely not.
However, I did
Mm,
I did just check because one of the things I'm kind of interested in the in language learning technology, for example,
mm.
and I did check, and I found that you can actually have conversations with ChatGPT in Welsh now. I don't know if you knew that.
No, I didn't.
Yeah.
Oh
So
gosh.
there's a YouTube video that shows you how to do that because now that you
Right.
have text to speech and ChatGPT can actually recognize what you say and turn it into text as well, you can have these conversations.
Um,
So I wonder if for additional practice, this offers anyone learning a language the opportunity to have instant access and responses in the language that they're learning, which I think as an additional thing can only be a good thing for me.
Yes, definitely. I think in some ways, English is at the forefront of language learning, language teaching, isn't it? And I think sometimes Welsh has been a little bit left behind, and so something like that, it can only be good.
Yeah, well, I'd give it a go. I don't know how good it is, of course, but I've tried it for English, and you get pretty good responses from it. And I think it could be a way of as I said, of someone having additional practice in whatever language they're learning.
Yeah, that's the idea. Yeah.
Okay, well, Claire, coming to an end of our time now, but is there anything else we haven't talked about that you think may be of interest to the listeners about your work or your interests?
Well, I mean, on a personal basis, I could say that when I got sent to the Andes, it was the right place for me because I'm a very outdoor person. So it was the perfect thing because Gaiman is a small town. It's on the edge of the steppe, on the edge of the desert, and chances to do things, you have to go a long way to climb a mountain, for example. Whereas here in the Andes, we've got lots on our doorstep. So the actual lifestyle is very, it's a very nice lifestyle. And I think that also reflects in the way that people come to the lessons, to the school. It's part of this healthy lifestyle where they're living outdoors and so on. And I hope that continues. I hope we don't lose it as the towns are getting bigger. I hope we don't lose that connection with nature and the relaxed kind of lifestyle. But that's pretty Latino as well, isn't it? You can make somewhere relaxed, but it's definitely Patagonia is definitely not like living in a big city, which has its drawbacks because whenever you want to get anywhere, it takes you a long time. You suddenly remember that you're at the foot of the world, but that's what preserved the Welsh language. So being so far away from other influences helped keep the language, and so I kind of hope that will continue, and that the developments that we've seen from a project that originally just taught adults, we've now got 3 primary schools involved where there are 150 pupils in each school learning their subjects in Spanish, and then a fair amount in Welsh too. So it's something that we need the contact with the world, but we hope that the bad influences don't come, and that we can carry on with this nice laid back Patagonian lifestyle.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And so it definitely sounds like the Welsh language is alive and thriving in Patagonia. Is that also the case in other countries that you know about, in other parts of the world, or is Patagonia a very special, unique place because of that?
Oh, I think it's absolutely unique because the Welsh went all the way around the world. There were lots of Welsh emigrating to North America, to Australia, to New Zealand. But what happened was that the English was so strong that any local languages brought by the settlers were pretty much wiped out pretty quickly, and everybody spoke English. Whereas here, the Welsh were alone for such a long time that they managed to keep the language until much more recently. So as long as we keep on with this idea that, 2 languages is better than one, and people are persuaded to learn a second language, I think this is going to be a unique part of the world for some time to come. I know that I have a cousin who lives in Melbourne in Australia, and I know that she gives Welsh classes, but it's a small group of people. It's not the communities with the link to the geographical location. So I think this is a unique place, and the project is unique as well, because we're very grateful that every 3 years the funding question comes up, and we hope that it's going to be funded for another year. And we've been doing that for 26 years now, so we hope that it will carry on, because it's an example to Wales as well, that these people who have, as I said before, no economical reasons for learning the language, are doing so because they love it, because they love the language and the benefits that it brings. So I really hope that will continue for a long time to come.
Yeah, well, it sounds like there are good arguments for why it should continue, and it doesn't sound like it's probably not a lot of money for the kind of impact that it's having as well, being able to do that. And also what you said before was that the towns are expanding, the interest in the Welsh language is expanding where you are as well, so that can only be a good thing.
Yes. As long as the people come with open minds, that's fine. We're going to be able to keep on doing what we're doing. And the school here is growing next year. We're going to have a first intake of secondary. So
wow.
That's quite exciting, and it's another challenge. We need more teachers. So yes, it will be a new project and a new challenge for the community. But it just goes to show, because it's a community project, and the British Council sends the teacher who will help with that project. But the community is what has to run the everyday hard work. So it shows that the community is interested in that kind of education, which is a special kind of education, because it includes so much more than just the language, of course.
Of course. And, I imagine they're very lucky to have someone like you there as well, to provide that consistency of, the link to Wales, the consistency of the project as well, rather than just having a rotating number of teachers coming every year. I think that is probably quite crucial, even though you might not want to recognize it yourself, but I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is.
Oh, I would like to think so. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So, Claire, thank you very, very much for your time. I've been fascinated hearing more about this. I did know about it before, but only on a very superficial level. So thanks for reaching out and suggesting we have a chat about it, because I feel really energized that this is happening and that it's going so well. So, and congratulations to you and all the other teachers and the community for all the hard work to make it for making it happen. I think it's great to hear this happening.
Oh. Well, thank you very much for giving me the space to witter on about things that I find fascinating and exciting, and I am passionate about it.
Yeah, no, pleasure talking to you, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you very much, and you.
Are you looking for lesson planning materials to kickstart the new term? We've got you covered. The Day is a global online resource that turns the news into lessons. We're offering listeners a free resource on Andrew Tate that you can find on thedaynews.co/Tate. Inspire personal development and critical thinking for your students by downloading the Tate Debate today, and feel more confident addressing sensitive topics with your class. Visit thedaynews.co/Tate to find out more.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
In In today's educational environment, students and teachers are juggling a mix of face-to-face, online and blended learning courses. Canvas by Instructure helps teachers navigate these diverse learning experiences with a user-friendly virtual learning environment that offers flexible access to courses and a consistent learning experience, all while streamlining everyday teaching processes. The world's best schools and universities are using Canvas to create dynamic courses, collaborate seamlessly, and access actionable data that drives student success.
So that brings us to the end of today's Twilight Show. Many thanks to today's special guest, Claire Vaughan, and all of you who joined us live. Really enjoyed talking to Claire. There's so much happening there. It's fascinating to get an insight into the wonderful work that she and the other teachers are doing and the community out there. It's really, really great to hear. I hope you feel the same way. And so that's it from me. There are Teachers Talk radio shows all week on all manner of interesting topics. So please listen in live or back to the recordings when they're made available, which will be the case with this recording very soon as well. And I hope you will join me next week at the same time. Bye for now.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.